Welcome to Good Thinking Live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, good thinkers from all across the globe, where we take a little bit of time, about 30 minutes, to think about our thinking, to set aside all the what to think so we can focus on improving how we think. So if you're streaming in from LinkedIn or if you're streaming in from YouTube, let us know who you are and where you're from. Let us know if you're a regular good thinker or if you're new to this good thinking game. We're going to do some fun thought exercises today and hopefully come out of this with a better understanding of how to allocate your concern and your excitement for uncertainty, because uncertainty is a part of our lives. It's there in every aspect of our lives, more of us than we like to consider, but it's not necessarily a scary thing. It can be an amazing thing. So let us know who you are and where you're from. Orville, I want to say thinking, my favorite topic too. So welcome to the show. Barkley joining in from Washington, D.C., a regular good thinker. Mary from Boston, fantastic. Keep them coming. Let us know who you are and where you're from. And we'll try to bring as many of your comments in. This is a participatory show, so we want to hear from everyone. And the cool thing about this is the perspective, the global perspective that this little half hour gives good thinkers to think about our thinking. All right, here we go. In the realm of uncertainty, how do you know how to allocate your excitement and your concern, your excitement and seizing opportunity, and your fear and anxiety about risk? How do you think about your uncertainty? Do you have any tools when you think about uncertainty? Is it more exciting or is it more scary? So scary, exciting, put it in the chat. And I'm going to, while you put that in the chat, I'm going to welcome some good thinkers to the show. So we have Brett from San Clemente, California. Welcome, Brett. Stephen from the 45th Parallel. I love it. Corey from Ontario, Canada. Ray joining from Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, former home of the Book of the Month Club. Okay, I love when people share little statistics or unknown facts about where they're calling in from. So this is great. And we have got Badi from Lebanon. Welcome. And we have got Abdul Rahim from Sudan. Welcome. And okay, so Mary, we've got the first thing. With me, it fluctuates. So when you think about uncertainty, Mary says it's kind of fluctuates between excitement and fear. So I think at the end of today, maybe there'll be another way that you can think about uncertainty in a way that might be more instructive, might be clearer, and we'll see what you think. All right, let's get started. So here's the first question. Or the second question, I guess. When you hear a weather forecast that says that there's a 40% chance of rain on Wednesday in your city. So you're looking at the forecast, it's Monday today, you're looking out, you say Wednesday, 40% chance of rain in your city. What does this mean? So here you're going to go. Ready? So there's A and B and C. So A, B, or C. 1, does it mean that it will rain over 40% of your city? That's A. Does it mean that it will rain for 40% of the day on Wednesday? So like we know that at some point there's a 40%, it's going to rain 40% of the day on Wednesday. Or does it mean that it will rain on 40% of the days with the exact same atmospheric conditions that are predicted for Wednesday? Which one is it? A, B, or C? What do you think? A 40% chance of rain on Wednesday in your city. And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to welcome some more good thinkers on. We've got another one from another good thinker from Ontario, Canada. So Stephen says, in terms of thinking about uncertainty as exciting or fearful, it depends on what's the worst or most likely potential outcome for uncertainty. I love that you said that. Potential outcome. When you think of potential outcome, do you think of potential as possible outcome, or probable outcome? All right. And we have Let's see. We have Mansoor. It depends on my mood. I think when I've had enough fear, I hit F it and it turns from fear to excitement. Ooh, that's good. I'd like to know how to do that. So, okay. So Mansoor, we've got A. Brett says A. That a 40% chance of rain means that it will rain over 40% of your city. Mansoor says C. Betty says A. Mary says C. All right. So what do you think? What do you think a 40% chance of rain? None of the above. My first thought is there's a 60% chance that it isn't going to rain at all. I see why you say that, Bridget. I totally see why you say that. Technically, the answer for what a 40% chance of rain on Wednesday in your city, because it's important when you're dealing with probability with numbers that you put some guardrails around it. Because if I just said there's a 60% chance of rain, you'd be like, okay, where? Over what period of time? What are you even talking about? And we hear those predictions all the time. There's a 60% chance that AI is going to take over. What does that even mean? There's no guardrail. So let's put the guardrails on and say Wednesday in your city. So Ray says 60% half full person. Ray, excellent. I love it. I love the interaction. Well, what a 40% chance of rain on Wednesday in your city means that given the predicted atmospheric conditions on Wednesday, in the past, when those conditions were in place, it rained 40% of the time. So that's what it means. It doesn't quite. So then my question is, do you bring an umbrella on Wednesday or not? Do you bring an umbrella on Wednesday, or do you just hope and hope and hope that you won't get rained on if you have to go out? Or maybe you love rain. You want to get rained on. You hope and hope and hope it does rain so your plants, you don't need to water your plants. How do you deal? First of all, if you don't even really quite understand what probability means, you can't prepare for it. And if you don't distinguish between possibility and probability, there's a problem there too. And that's what we're going to get to. So I'm going to take the banner off and make sure we have more room for your comments. All right, let's get into a quick lesson on probability versus probability before we jump in. It seems like now maybe you already kind of know this intuitively, but we'll just kind of go over it. So possibility is a chance that something may happen or may be true. And possibility is, is just limited by your imagination, which is why when we mistake possibility for probability and our imaginations are going wild in this age of information overload, it can be debilitating. It can cause anxiety. And maybe at the end of today, we'll find a way to tease it out, to move forward and maybe embrace uncertainty with a little bit more comfort. So that's the goal. That's the goal. So Brett says, hope is not a strategy. Bring an umbrella. Rubber chicken. Hope is not a strategy. Now, hope is a nice thing, but from a good thinking perspective, where the goal, the ultimate goal, is to make better decisions and move on the journey closer to the truth, whether it's pretty or not, comforting or not. Probably Brett's comment is a closer way to deal with the difference between possibility and probability. So possibility, we said, is something may, something, so now possibility is there's a chance that something may happen or may be true. Probability is the level of possibility of something happening or something being true. Probability deals with numbers, forecasts, and it gets those numbers from the past. And the past, informs the present. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes we can't even see all the elements. We don't have access to all the things. So possibility deals with potential, with our imagination, which is wonderful. But probability deals with likelihood, and it requires putting numbers to those to that likelihood. All right. How would you define something as possible? Impossible. Well, it's something that, anyone want to take a stab? Something that can't be done, can't be true, can't happen. It's impossible. What about improbable? Something improbable. That's something that's unlikely to happen or unlikely to be done. So possible can be done, but it may or may not be unlikely. Something might or might not happen, something might or might not be true. It's possible. Improbable, unlikely, right? Impossible, can't. Now, if there's any mathematicians out there, I don't want to get into the details of when, and that, Barkley, I'm calling on you. I don't want to get, who else is kind of math minded, where you're kind of parsing the difference between zero probability and impossibility. Okay, because there's some things in there. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about just ways of thinking about this for our own brain. So I'm going to bring in some more comments. Corey says, always prepare for inclement weather. Okay, but maybe who is it that says Josh Waitskin or someone else says it's not that there's good or bad weather, there's just appropriate clothing. That might be a way. No umbrella, jacket with hood. Okay, if you live in Portland, okay, Thelma, if you live in Portland, that is true. You can tell someone is not an Oregonian or not Portlander if they're holding an umbrella. We don't hold umbrellas here. So we can tell the tourists by their umbrellas. All right, where are we located? Southern Cal or Seattle? Relevant information. Is it relevant information? Is the forecast for 40 degrees, a 40% chance of rain on Wednesday in your city determined by whether you're in Southern Cal or Seattle? No, not necessarily, because the atmospheric condition would apply to that forecast. So yes, it's relevant, but you would be using atmospheric conditions relevant to where you are. All right. Math major here, but not necessarily good at math. I know, it's funny. You look back on what you majored in, you're like, gosh, what? How did I even pass that test? I'm Thelma from New York City. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right. So we've got kind of the probable, improbable, possible, impossible. All of those things are important to think about. Would you say that if something is possible, that it's highly probable? How do you think about the relationship between something being possible and something being probable? Either highly probable or not so highly probable, unlikely, improbable. How do you think about that? Because just because something is possible doesn't mean that it's highly probable. And often possibility and probability are confused with each other. And that leads to some interesting biases, which we will get into. And it leads to suboptimal, not optimal decision making. So this is where this teasing out the difference between possibility and probability can be massively helpful in moving you toward better decisions, toward good thinking. How often do you see that the mere chance of something happening must mean that it's something you should stress about? So the possibility of something happening means that you should stress about it. Do you feel that? Does that resonate with you? Yes or no? Because just because there's a sense that something, chance of something happening, it doesn't mean that it will absolutely happen. So how do you know if you should stress about it? Should you stress about it if it's more than 50% possible? What about probable? More than 50% probable? So can worry or anxiety influence probability? What do you think? If you worry about something that is possible, can it influence probability? Yes or no? All you do is worry. I'm not saying you go out and do something about that worry. You just worry. Can it influence probability? What do you think? Even if you kind of know the answer, do you sometimes think that worrying about something makes it less likely? Share in the chat. Share in the chat. Okay. So do you ever play the lottery? Do you ever play the lottery? I know gambling is against some cultures or religions, but in my culture, the lottery is legal and it funds a lot of good things like schools and stuff like that. So do any of you play the lottery? Because it's possible that you will win the lottery today. The probability is very low. It's 0 if you don't play the lottery, but it's possible, right? So even though the probability is small, millions of people still play the lottery because sometimes someone wins and it might be them. So Brett says, impossible is true until it happens. 4-minute mile, private rockets to space. Absolutely. And you could actually, and here's the deal, the 4-minute mile was never impossible. It was not impossible. In the inspirational speaking, I'm talking about mathematically, it was not impossible. It was improbable. That's the difference. So the 4-minute mile was not deemed impossible. It was deemed highly improbable. Private rockets to space was not deemed impossible. It was deemed improbable. Now, someone might, when you mix up the two, someone might be saying, well, that's impossible. But I'm talking about when they really stop and calculate the difference and teasing out the difference between impossible and improbable, it was not 0 probability. So you have to kind of think about that a little differently. It helps you. Barkley says, I need the probability and the significance to know if I should worry, but not to know if I will worry. Aha! Rubber chickens. Sometimes worry creeps up whether we choose it or not. Let's see what we've got. Mary says, no, I don't think that stress or worry is going to change probability. Farah says, worrying makes it more possible. Law of attraction. Is that true? Is there evidence for that? Or is that a little tiny bit of, and nothing wrong with that, a little tiny bit of magical thinking? If you do nothing but worry, does it make something more probable or less probable? Some people think, I worry, and it makes it less probable. Maybe they worry, and that makes them do some things, actual things, to make it less probable, but sitting on a rock and worrying about it, doing nothing, is not likely to change the probability. Corey says it will always create a perspective that it will happen. A perspective that it will happen. Ray says worry can influence if I am in control, like worrying about making a mistake may increase my chances of making one. Is worrying alone? Does worrying alone, or does worrying to the extent that it affects your behavior? Yes, we do play the lottery. Woohoo! Hope you win. All right. If there is an issue that's outside your influence or control, then anxiety, worry is futile and only leads to unwise actions. However, considering how to mitigate the issue is more beneficial. If it leads to unwise actions, then it's the unwise actions that change the probability. How about that? Corey says, creates an illusion. You can easily convince yourself that it's likely to happen to you. Okay, is that good thinking? Is that good thinking? I mean, there's not a right or wrong answer. I don't think it is. But, I can update my thinking in the face of new evidence. And that's the thing about probability. Probability is a moment in time. And the probabilities change when you take action based on that probability. I'm not talking about sitting and stressing about it. I'm talking about if that stress causes you to take action to either mitigate or inaction that prevents you from mitigating the things that could cause something bad to happen. So it's really about changing the probability by changing the conditions. And if you think that something's possible, but it's highly improbable, then you have to allocate your resources accordingly. Separate it out. I'm going to give you something really kind of scary to think about. How many of you are brave enough to do a kind of scary thought experiment? Tell me, I'm brave enough to do a thought experiment, and the others can watch. We'll see. All right. So let's say Jarmesh says, good leaders shouldn't worry, but start with working with probabilities. I think working with probabilities is really good. And where do you get probabilities? Looking at outside of your unique situation, looking outside and seeing what's happened in the past to others in similar situations. Aha. Okay. All right. So let's get to it. Let's get to something scary. Let me ask you this. How many of you do things that could be seen as superstitious, but you do them to prevent bad things from happening? Now, I don't want to say yes to this, but I'm going to admit that sometimes these things creep in. If I don't make it up the stairs in time, something will happen. And I know it's ridiculous because what I'm doing is I'm increasing the chances I'm going to fall on the stairs by hurrying up the stairs. So let's do it. All right, I have nothing to lose. So Monster says, I have nothing to lose. Let's do this. All right, first we're going to warm it up. So how many of you do these superstitious things? So for example, you may think it's no big deal to touch the door 4 times, since doing so will prevent the house from burning down or your partner falling down the stairs. Do you do things like touching the door 4 times to prevent something that's possible from getting more probable? Do you do that? Do you ever do anything like that where you do something, to prevent something that's possible from getting less or more probable? Something superstitious. How many want to admit? I do. I don't like that I do. I don't think it's good thinking, but sometimes it creeps in because we're human. So in the grand scheme of things, touching the door 4 times doesn't seem like such a big deal, does it? What's it going to hurt? But when you add up all these small things that we do every single day to try to stop a stressor or prevent something that is anxiety provoking from occurring, so you can get hours and hours of daily rituals that people can get locked into because they feel as if they have to do them to prevent something bad from happening. So they're not as innocuous as we think. All right, let's see. Jennifer says, I do. Yeah, I do too. I do too. Welcome, Jennifer. All right. So if you are brave enough to do this, let's try this exercise. You don't have to do this exercise. You have to think about doing this exercise. All right. And then you have to share with us, those of you who are brave enough to do it, we'll share with the rest of us who are like, I can't do this, how do we feel? All right. Think about writing this down on a piece of paper and putting it in your pocket. And you're going to think about this. You write down, I hope that lightning strikes me today. I hope that lightning strikes me today. Now imagine, maybe you could do it. If you do it, then you can come back onto the chat later and tell us how what happened, how you feel. Okay. I hope that lightning strikes us today. And you carry that piece of paper around all day and see if you actually get struck by lightning. You're probably not going to get struck, but it's possible. Do you think, I'm not really comfortable with doing that? Does that give you kind of a discomfort? That is the discomfort where you're mushing. That's a sign, and we all have it, that we're mushing possibility and probability. All right, let's see. So Mansoor says, I feel comfortable. It feels uncomfortable and kind of changes my mindset, if anything, doing those little kinds of things. But those things can add up. Those things can add up. And in our world of increasing information overload and massive uncertainty about all kinds of things that may be outside of our control, in the larger scheme of things, those things can be debilitating, even though we all do them. Bridget says, I touch the outside of the airplane as I board. I could totally see myself doing something like that. Thanks a lot. I'm flying this week. That's just going to give me more ideas. All right. Who is willing to do the piece of paper with lightning strike in their pocket, mentally or even physically? Who's brave enough? Who's going to do it? I'll do it. I'll do it. Even thinking about it. And here's the other one. Next level good thinkers. Next level good thinkers. Think about this. I hope that blank gets struck by lightning today. And then you insert the person you love the most in the whole entire world. I hope that blank person gets struck by lightning today. And you put that in your pocket and you walk around all day. Are you nervous? On a scale of 1, nothing. I don't even think twice about it. This is ridiculous. All the way to 10. I'm nervous. Yes. So Mary says, yes, it makes me a bit uncomfortable, honestly. Okay. So Mansoor is going to do it. It just started raining. See? Just started raining. We thought it and the rain came, right? No. So would you be more comfortable putting the piece of paper in about yourself? I hope lightning strikes me today. Or putting it about someone else? I hope that so-and-so someone that I love the most gets struck by lightning today. Which one would you be most uncomfortable with? And maybe you're not uncomfortable with any, but if you're just thinking about this, and any of you who are brave enough to be thinking about this, share this. Curious, because this is an example of our brains, almost, we can't even almost help it, but we can start to work on it, and how we deal with uncertainty and how we think that our actions impact the future. Jennifer says, I'll put you, do it. Say, I hope that Becky, you don't get downward rubber chicken for you. I hope that Becky gets struck by lightning today. And I'm looking outside and it's not impossible. It looks like a day that you could have lightning. So that happens. You know who to blame. Jennifer. All right. So let us know if you think you can do this experiment, and if you feel more comfortable doing it for yourself or doing it for others. We may say that it's okay to think about this for ourselves, but what if what we do can affect others? We can't do that. But what if writing things down actually changes the possibility and probability levels? If we think this, or if we think that writing this down, it's not a great thing. It does not affect the probability unless writing it down means that you're taking different action beyond just writing it and it's a piece of paper. All right. And then Julie says, Thelma says, I would not do either. Okay, excellent. And I love why would you not do either? Jillian says, I'm more scared that the paper will fall out of my pocket and someone will read it rather than. Oh, that's hilarious. But you could say, I love that. That's probably true. And then you think you're crazy. Oh my goodness. All right. So are you familiar with, we'll kind of get ready to wrap things up. I just think this is a fun experiment. We'll see. Oh, we get some other people saying whether we're going to do it or not. Then we're going to get into probability bias, because I think probability bias is really helpful. Paul says, nope, I won't put negative statements on paper against me or anyone else. Only positive reinforcements, which can actually cause possibilities. What does it mean to cause a possibility? I mean, the possibilities are out there. How do you cause a possibility? Now, you can influence a probability, but I would argue, and I'd love to, this is the fun, right? There's not what to think. I would argue that you can't cause a possibility. The possibilities are there. Jennifer says, I don't think that, but it still makes me uncomfortable. As long as you put my name on it, girlie. All right, only if positive. Okay, only if positive. Sounds voodoo. All right. I wouldn't want to put that into the atmosphere. Bad karma. All right. So this is a human thing. Like, I work on good thinking all the time. I try to avoid these kinds of superstitious thinking, but maybe it's maybe it's like part of our makeup. I would be uncomfortable doing it, even if I knew that, barring changing any behavior, walking around with, a lightning rod or something, barring any changed behavior, I would know that putting that piece of paper in my pocket would not change the probability of lightning striking me, or I think I'll get back at Jennifer, or lightning striking Jennifer. It would not change the probability. Possibilities are there. Whether we see them or not, they're there. But probabilities, which need to be updated, by the way, can be updated, are probably not affected by me putting that piece of paper. And I know this, and yet still, we're uncomfortable. Positive thinking can cause positive outcomes. Do we have evidence of that? Positive thinking alone. Now we have the Pygmalion effect. We have the self-fulfilling prophecy effect. The research is a little different than how we think about that. And if you think about possibilities and map out things that increase your probability, you're right. But just sitting thinking alone, without doing anything else or putting a piece of paper, it's hard to find evidence of that. I know it's a trope that we talk about. So I'm going to just wrap it up by saying a couple of things, by talking about the possibility bias. Anyone familiar with the possibility bias? The possibility bias is an exaggerated fear of possible but low probability negative events. So we think that possible but low probability negative events we're more fearful than we should be relative to the probability, and an exaggerated expectation of low probability. Look at me mixing the two up. Low probability possible events. And the possibility bias pretty much afflicts all of us. That's why we're all uncomfortable with some of this paper stuff in our pockets. It may afflict all of us. I don't know. but it leads to poor financial decisions, such as over-insuring against unlikely losses or allowing fears to get in the way of exciting opportunities. And on the flip side, it causes us to over-invest in highly unlikely payoffs. Cryptocurrency, maybe? Do you think what causes us to have this possibility bias? Now, if you're an emerging leader or a leader, your leadership style when faced with uncertainty, what do you think? Do you think A, most things are certain and can be managed by process and planning? B, most things are uncertain and can't be reliably managed? Or C, do you use probabilistic thinking where you identify the most likely outcomes while acknowledging there's always an element of chance? What kind of leader are you? A, most things are certain and can be managed by planning and process. B, too much uncertainty. Can't even deal with it. I'm just going to wishful think my way into success. Or C, probabilistic thinking, where you look outside and look at situations as they tend to occur and putting numbers on those situations, updating as you go, but always acknowledging that there's an element of chance. Because data is imperfect and incomplete and uncertain. And there's usually more than one explanation for why things happen the way they happen. Events are determined by infinite complex sets of factors. And this can make possibility exciting or scary. But when you start to turn possibility into probability, like putting numbers on things, not sitting there, the power of positive thinking. I mean, not to say that there's, actually there might be something wrong with that, but not to say that, that's inherently wrong if you do that in lieu of doing things that could actually affect probability. When you start to turn possibility into probability, rather than trying to be right, you can actually be less wrong over time. And for good thinkers, this is a good and achievable goal. So just start trying to turn your possibilities into probabilities, both good and bad. Put some numbers on it, continue to update it, and try to see the actual actions that can affect the probability in the direction that you would like to see happen. Imagine the possibilities and put numbers on the probabilities. Have a great day. See you next week. I'm so glad you were here. Thanks for all your participation. I'm going to bring in some last minute different kinds of leaders. Mary's a C leader. Nancy's an A and C. A and C. Fantastic. Have a great week. Thanks, good thinkers. Keep the comments coming. Invite your other friends who want to do good thinking for a half an hour or 32, almost 33 minutes in this case. Sorry, we ran long. Have a great week.